Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we take the most complex stories, the densest research, and the most compelling cases, and give you the fast track to true insight.
And if you want to be well-informed without, drowning in all that source material, this is your shortcut.
We have a case today that it really starts with a tragedy so personal, so almost ordinary in the world of police work, that the system barely even registered it at first.
Exactly. But that single tragedy quickly unraveled into one of the most terrifying national manhunts in modern history.
A hunt for a killer whose weapon wasn't just a gun, but what was it? The perfect, calculated placement of a single quote from a forgotten poem.
It's absolutely chilling when you think about it.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Our starting point is a moment of just pure agonizing dread. We're in Denver.
And the source material really paints a picture. You have two detectives, Wexler and Ray St. Louis, described as a classic Mutt and Jeff pair.
Right, the tall one and the short one. They're in these dark overcoats, and they're walking up to a house in Boulder.
There's a heralds of ruin. The source tells us that the woman inside, Riley, Sean McEvoy's wife, she already knew.
The moment she saw them without her husband.
Right. Every cop's spouse lives with that subconscious dread of that knock on the door. But what makes this one so different is that the news is devastating, but also strangely routine.
Her husband, a decorated officer, committed suicide. That's the official story.
Our mission in this deep dive is to follow that unraveling. We're tracking the journey from what looks like a textbook, if tragic, police suicide.
Denver detective Sean McEvoy.
Right. From him supposedly killing himself in Estes Park into this incredibly sophisticated national investigation of serial murder, betrayal, and just massive institutional failure.
The central challenge of this case, and I think the reason it captivated so many people is it's almost impossible.
It really is.
How does a reporter, Jack McEvoy, Sean's twin brother, how does he prove his decorated homicide detective brother was murdered?
When all of the initial quantifiable evidence points straight to a self-inflicted death, he was literally fighting the entire system.
So let's lay out those initial facts, the foundation of that official conclusion.
Okay, so you have Sean McEvoy, a respected 12-year veteran. He's the head of the Crimes Against Persons Unit.
A big deal.
A very big deal. He allegedly died in Estes Park near a specific body of water using his own gun. A note was found, its contents immediately sealed.
And crucially, the forensics were definitive.
That's the key. He tested positive for gunshot residue, or GSR, on his dominant hand.
And that GSR test, that's traditionally the ironclad conclusion, right? I mean, case closed.
Absolutely. And on top of that, the official motive, according to the investigating team, was simple despondency over job difficulties.
Specifically, this one case.
The highly troubling unsolved strangulation and mutilation of a 19-year-old named Teresa Lofton. The official report stated this case had just crushed Sean McEvoy psychologically.
Okay, so let's start with that shadow, the Lofton case, which supposedly drove Sean to despair. This wasn't just another unsolved file in the pile, was it?
No, not at all. It was horrific. And it had personally consumed Sean to the point that, in his final reports, he was referring to the victim by her nickname, Terry. He'd internalized her death.
So the details of that case are pretty necessary context, then, for understanding Sean's state of mind.
You have to understand them. Teresa was a young girl with crystal blue eyes, found mutilated in Washington Park. This was 3 months after she disappeared from a daycare center parking lot. The horror wasn't just the death. It was the staging.
And the staging introduced this paradox that just haunted Sean.
That's right. The body had been dead for over 40 hours when an early morning jogger found her.
But the Emmy's report concluded the body couldn't have been in that popular park for more than about 3 hours without being noticed.
Exactly. So that meant the initial crime scene, the place where her body was held for those critical, 37 missing hours, was somewhere else entirely.
The killer was staging the discovery.
And Sean became absolutely fixated on one specific, almost useless forensic clue that he believed was the key.
The kapok fibers.
Kapok fibers. He thought they would lead him to that hidden site.
Kapok fibers? That sounds incredibly obscure. What are they? And why did Sean think they were so important?
They're naturally occurring fibers, kind of like cotton, but much less common today.
Right.
The report noted they're primarily used in specific buoyancy materials.
Like old life vests or boat cushions.
Exactly that, or sometimes specialized sleeping bags or acoustic paneling. Sean was convinced that if they could just find a location where kapok fibers were common, a specific boat shop, a weird storage unit, they would find the initial crime scene and just maybe the killer.
So the official story is he's chasing this ghost of a clue. It's driving him mad, and that's the motive for the suicide.
But Jack, his twin, was immediately suspicious. He just refused to believe his brother, who was known for his dedication, would quit on a case like that, or on life.
And the location of the death was the first major red flag for him.
A huge one. Sean died near a lake in Estes Park, which is the same area where their older sister Sarah had died years earlier. She'd fallen through thin ice.
Wow. So for Jack, choosing that spot, it felt intensely peculiar for a suicide. Why go to a place so loaded with familial trauma?
It just didn't track. And a suicide note is supposed to bring closure, but Sean's note did the complete opposite.
Instead of a typical farewell or an apology, Sean's message was just cryptic.
Out of space, out of time.
Jack felt immediately that this didn't sound like a man giving up. It sounded like a riddle.
Or a literary reference, or maybe even a coded message meant for someone else. This riddle immediately fueled Jack's suspicion, and it transformed his grief into a full-blown investigative mandate. His brother was murdered.
And that's the pivot point. Jack, the reporter, starts doing what he does best. He relentlessly questions the initial witnesses and the officers, Wexler and St. Louis.
He focused intently on the moments immediately surrounding the shot, relying on the single witness, a man named Patina.
Right. Pina was inside his shack. He heard the shot, ran to the car, saw Sean was shot.
And then ran back to his shack and made 2 calls, first to 911 and then to his supervisor.
And Jack, with a journalist's eye for detail, he realizes this sequence creates a crucial time gap.
A 30-second gap, or possibly longer, where the scene was completely unsupervised.
30 seconds. It's not much time, but
Mm.
if the killer was meticulous or an insider.
It's more than enough time for staging, and Jack immediately hammered the investigating officers with this staging hypothesis.
Which brings us back to the GSR, the gunshot residue.
That particulate matter that's expelled when you fire a gun. It's almost impossible not to have it on your hands if you pull the trigger.
So Jack's hypothesis was audacious. He suggested the killer used that 30-second window to quickly place a GSR-coated glove on Sean's hand.
A glove the killer had worn when firing the weapon. Rub it on the hand, remove the glove, and stage the rest of the scene.
But wait, how could the killer have a glove perfectly coated with residue from Sean's specific gun ready to go?
That's the terrifying implication of the staged suicide. The killer either had access to Sean's gun beforehand and practiced a shot while wearing the glove,
Ooh.
or the killer shot Sean while wearing the glove and then transferred the residue. Either way, it signals a sophisticated pre-planned execution. It's designed to be bulletproof against forensic scrutiny.
It makes the whole suicide conclusion look like a cover-up, not because the police were malicious, but because they were just too quick to accept the forensic certainty of the GSR.
Exactly. And Jack uncovered other physical details that supported the staging theory.
What were they?
Well, first, when the officers arrived, they had to use a Slim Jim tool to pop the lock because all the car doors were locked. The killer left the scene neat and tidy.
And the second detail.
Despite the cold weather and Sean being fully dressed in warm clothes, the windows of the car were noticeably fogged.
Fogged windows in cold weather with the engine off.
Yeah.
That makes no sense.
Unless someone recently introduced a lot of heat and humidity into that closed space.
So Jack's theory was the killer turned the heat on high, maybe the defroster, to create that fog.
A temporary curtain. It would allow the killer to conceal their actions while staging the scene, manipulating the body, placing the weapon. The police missed it entirely because they were focused on the GSR and the note.
But if the heat was on, wouldn't the police have noticed the engine running or the car being warm?
That's the meticulousness of it. The source implies the engine was quickly shut off, but the residual heat and the sharp temperature change outside caused the fogging to persist, especially if the internal temperature was maximized just for a minute or two.
It was a high-risk move that paid off because the responding officers were looking for a simple suicide. They weren't looking for evidence of heat manipulation.
And that's the moment the police started to see their own institutional blind spot. Wexler, one of the original detectives, admitted this profound sense of betrayal. He basically said, "A fucking reporter." Realizing Jack had exposed all these signs of murder they had just blindly accepted as suicide.
Jack proved that the supposedly ironclad case was vulnerable to manipulation by a killer who knew police procedure intimately.
Which starts pointing toward an insider, someone who understands how police investigate their own.
That's the critical insight here. The minute you crack the certainty of the GSR, the case instantly changes from a personal tragedy to a professional hit job.
And the question becomes, who is capable of staging a perfect police suicide?
So the suicide theory is cracked. But that just leaves this horrific question. If Sean was murdered, why?
And the answer takes Jack far beyond Denver. Once he knew it was murder, his journalistic instincts just took over. He went national, conducting this massive computer search on police suicides, looking for patterns.
Patterns that transcended local jurisdiction.
And that search quickly led him to a chilling parallel case in Chicago that had happened a year earlier. And this wasn't just a similar death. It was virtually a mirror image.
The Chicago connection. This involved a detective, John Brooks,
who supposedly killed himself after investigating a particularly devastating case, the high-profile kidnapping and murder of a 12-year-old boy, Bobby Smathers.
Smathers was strangled and found mutilated, with 8 fingers missing.
And just like the Lofton case, it had consumed the detective, leading to the assumption of despondency and suicide.
But just like Sean, Brooks left a cryptic literary sign.
Right. Brooks's last entry, noted in his journal or calendar, was simply the word usher,
which Jack immediately recognized as a direct connection to Edgar Allan Poe's tale, The Fall of the House of Usher.
That coincidence was just too strong to ignore. You have a detective investigating a horrific mutilation case who ends his life with a cryptic literary reference.
It's a signature. A serial killer signing off with romantic-era poetry. That's not just a killer, that's someone playing a game, mocking the investigators.
So Jack immediately goes back to his brother's note. Out of space, out of time. He runs it through a quotation database and confirms the connection.
It wasn't just a riddle.
It was a line from Edgar Allan Poe's lesser-known poem, Dreamland.
And that's the moment the case truly solidifies. Jack's theory becomes undeniable.
A serial killer is actively targeting homicide detectives, murdering them, carefully staging the scenes as suicides to avoid detection.
And using quotes from Poe as a chilling, personalized signature. This intellectual and audacious calling card immediately earned the killer a moniker.
The poet.
Jack's initial findings, connecting his brother and Brooks by this literary signature, were explosive enough to get the attention of the FBI's Behavioral Science Service.
The BSS, yeah. This is their specialized unit focusing on criminal profiling and behavioral analysis.
And they initiated a priority investigation, right?
Yep.
They recognized the unprecedented nature of this, a killer targeting law enforcement across multiple states.
And they quickly identified 6 homicide detectives across 6 states whose suicides now seemed linked by this Poe motif.
Let's list them because the scope is terrifying.
Okay, so you have McEvoy in Denver and Brooks in Chicago. Then there's Detective Clifford Beltran in Sarasota,
who was killed with a shotgun but still ruled a suicide.
Right. Then Detective Garland Pittry in Dallas. His quote was, "Sadly, I know I am shorn of my strength," from Poe's poem, For Annie.
Then there was Kotite in Albuquerque. His note was, "Haunted by ill angels," also from Dreamland.
And John P. McCafferty in Baltimore. And his case is fascinating because initially they didn't find a note.
So how did they link him?
The FBI added him because his death eerily resembled Brooks. He supposedly fired one practice shot into the floor before the fatal shot. But a former partner, a man named Dan Bledsoe, later confessed to destroying the note.
Why would he do that?
To make sure McCaffrey's widow received the full line-of-duty benefits. But his confession confirmed there was a literary note, which completed the pattern.
So the FBI profiling team starts analyzing this signature. They notice the quotes come from just 3 of Poe's works and his own reported last words. Why such specificity?
Well, for the BSS, this demonstrated 2 things. First, the offender was highly intelligent, meticulous, and likely well-educated. The Poe quote wasn't just a signature, it was a taunt. One agent, Bradley Hazelton, theorized that this was the offender's way of playing with us, a high-risk behavior that satisfies a massive ego.
They even attempted an early profile based on a description in Poe's Usher, suggesting the killer might be a reclusive white male with long, curly blonde hair and eyeglasses.
Which is an unusual example of trying to profile a physical appearance based entirely on literary symbolism.
But the literary link wasn't the only connection. We have to go back to that seemingly useless piece of evidence from the Lofton case.
The kapok fibers.
This is the physical link that validates Jack's entire theory.
It is. The kapok fibers, originally found in the Lofton case, were found to be present at 3 of the 6 detective deaths, specifically McEvoy, Brooks, and Beltran.
So this suggests the killer was tracking the detectives who were investigating these bait murders, the high-profile, unsolved crimes that had devastated them.
Wait, so if the kapok fibers were from the bait murder, like with Lofton, how did they get to the detective's death scene later?
It implies a connection between the killer of the children and the killer of the detectives. Either they were the same person, or the detective killer had access to the staging materials used in the initial bait murders.
And the BSS quickly concluded it was the latter. The killer was targeting detectives based on the specific, high-profile murder cases they were investigating.
They were using the victims' bodies as bait to draw the attention of the eventual real target, the homicide detective.
That dramatically raises the stakes. This isn't just about covering up crimes, it's a systematic campaign to eliminate the people who hunt predators.
And the sheer audacity of the methodology, killing the detective, staging the suicide, leaving an intellectual signature, it points us right back to the idea of an insider.
Someone who is comfortable moving within high-security environments and understands forensic limitations.
So the FBI investigation, now with all these high-level resources poured into it, leads the team to Phoenix.
Right, including Agent Rachel Walling and Assistant Director Bob Backus. They're looking at the death of a Detective Orsolak.
And while Orsolak's death was ultimately linked to the Poe pattern, the local police in Phoenix had already suspected homicide.
So why did Phoenix PD suspect homicide when Denver and Chicago were so quick to rule suicide?
Because the staging details were far less convincing than the others. And this is where a forensic specialist, Thompson, found a crucial, unique clue.
Oral swabs taken from Orsolak's body indicated the presence of a substance Thompson had seen before, a specific type of condom lubricant mixed with an animal fat extract. This was not a random substance.
An animal fat extract. Why would that specifically trigger a red flag with Thompson?
Because Thompson specialized in the forensic psychology of sex crimes, and this specific concoction was linked to a known hypnotic enhancer like codeine, previously used by a pedophile known as Horace Gumbel.
And Gumbel was known to the FBI.
Yes, he'd been part of the BSS Rape Project interviews years prior, where the FBI studied the methodologies of sexual predators. Thompson knew this meant the killer was likely using some form of chemical submission.
That precise, obscure forensic link suddenly shifts the entire investigation from poetry to the dark world of child pornography and sexual abuse.
And that trace leads them directly to the FBI's first prime suspect, William Gladden.
Gladden was a convicted pedophile who, crucially, had also been interviewed for that BSS rape project in Florida, alongside Gumbel. The BSS files were the connection.
So he fit the mold of having knowledge of these bait murders, but what evidence directly connected him to the detective deaths?
The timing was just damning. Gladden had been arrested in Santa Monica just days before Orsolak's murder for taking inappropriate photos of children at a carousel.
And his release on bail was labeled a catastrophic bureaucratic blunder by the FBI. This showed him operating in one of the victim cities right around the time of the events.
Beyond just the proximity, Gladden had a meticulous travel pattern.
The FBI traced his activities through an alias NH Breedlove, a Hertz Gold customer who rented cars in the victim cities, Chicago, Denver, Los Angeles, right around the time of the bait murders.
He was careful with his money, too. He wired funds from a specific bank in Jacksonville, which led to the discovery of his terrifying and organized business model.
Okay, so let's talk about that business. How did the FBI expose Gladden's trade?
It happened when they recovered his sophisticated digital camera, a high-end DigiShot 200. The Santa Monica police had seized it during his initial arrest, but failed to recognize it as a digital device storing massive amounts of data.
And on it, they found high-resolution photos of children, possibly victims, that Gladden was selling via a computer bulletin board network,
Called the PTL network.
which the FBI quickly concluded stood for preteen love.
And Gladden operated on this board using the pseudonym Eidolon.
Exactly. These digital transactions correlated perfectly with his bank deposits in Jacksonville, confirming he ran a lucrative, highly organized, and nationwide criminal trade.
A trade that would require him to travel to these cities and possibly commit the bait murders himself.
So on the surface, Gladden is the poet. He travels, he's methodical, he commits bait murders, he has a digital footprint.
But this is where the investigation gets messy. While the FBI is convinced they have their man, internal conflict and leaks immediately surface. Jack the reporter is brought in as an observer.
Under a strict, off-the-record deal with Bacchus to prevent a massive newspaper expose.
And almost immediately, that containment deal just collapses.
Why?
The Los Angeles Times publishes a detailed front-page story about the Poet investigation.
With specifics only insiders would know, it crushed Jack's exclusivity and threatened to scare the killer away entirely.
Jack, recognizing internal sabotage, immediately suspected Agent Gordon Thorson.
Rachel Walling's volatile ex-husband and co-worker, Thorson had exhibited this immense jealousy toward Jack and just general hostility towards the BSS's methods.
And Jack, using his journalistic tradecraft, verified his suspicions.
He accessed the phone records from Thorson's room in Phoenix, and they showed a late-night call to reporter Michael Warren, the man who broke the LA Times story, confirming Thorson was the source.
So Thorson had a clear agenda. Disrupt the case, undermine the profiling team, maybe hurt Rachel in the process.
But wait, if Gladden is the poet, doesn't he feel a little too obvious?
How so?
Serial killers who target detectives are usually highly organized professionals, not just traveling pedophiles. Doesn't Gladden feel too convenient, too easy a suspect for a killer who left such an elaborate signature?
That's the question Jack kept asking, and it's the core of the story's complexity. Gladden is perfect as a suspect because he's repulsive. He's linked to that specific forensic trace.
The lubricant and the animal fat extract.
And he's associated with the cities. He's the textbook monster. But the Poe's signature, that high-level literary taunt, it doesn't neatly fit a man running a crude PTL network, no matter how profitable it is.
The poet is intellectual, Gladden is simply depraved. That disparity is what keeps the investigation and Jack going, even after the FBI locks onto him.
While the FBI was focusing on Gladden, the Poet, or whoever was using the Eidolon identity, was still actively taunting them.
They sent a chilling fax to a General Quantico line referencing Detective Orsolak's funeral, which is an event only FBI insiders would know about.
And it closed with this deeply personal and boastful message. Short and tall, I killed them all.
That's a direct threat to the FBI team. Short and tall almost certainly referred to the physically short Rachel Walling and the tall Gordon Thorson.
Her ex-husband. The killer was inside their heads, knowing their physical appearance and their internal tensions.
Believing Gladden was their man, the FBI sets up a sting operation at Data Imaging in Los Angeles,
where Gladden was expected to reclaim his seized digital camera. The plan was just to catch him in the act.
But Agent Rachel Walling argued against immediate capture. She saw this as a rare, unprecedented opportunity for the BSS.
She wanted to watch a serial killer and observe his hunting patterns. Valuable intelligence the Bureau had never captured before.
Thorson vehemently rejected this. He cited the extreme risk to public safety and accused Rachel of wanting to use a live killer as a laboratory specimen.
He also subtly attacked Jack, implying that Jack only supported observation because he wanted a better story.
Which really highlights that institutional tension. The pragmatic need for capture versus the scientific drive for knowledge within the BSS.
The sting, predictably, immediately went sideways.
Gladden called the store from Hollywood, sensed the heavy police presence, and realized it was a trap. Bacchus, in charge, pulled the primary team out, believing they had thrown off Jack McEvoy, who was technically only an observer.
But Gladden still needed that camera. It was the source of his business.
So he arrived later, and his disguise was profoundly disturbing. Gladden walked into the store wearing the clothes and a wig of his most recent murder victim.
Darlene Kugel, a former porn actress whose body was later found in her apartment after Gladden checked out, with large amounts of incense burned to hide the smell of decomposition.
It's the ultimate act of disrespect, wearing the identity of his last victim while trying to retrieve the evidence of his trade.
Thorson, who had been waiting nearby in defiance of the stand-down order, confronted the disguised figure.
And the result was just swift, brutal violence. Thorson was fatally stabbed in the throat with a knife Gladden had taken from Darlene Kugel's apartment. He was killed almost instantly.
By a man the FBI thought they had cornered.
Jack, who had also defied the stand-down order and was present, realized what was happening. He engaged with Gladden after Bacchus's response team threw a stun grenade into the store.
In the chaos, Gladden was shot. And Jack noted Gladden's eyes as he was hit. He seemed to welcome the bullet, a strange final act of masochism or release.
And here's the pivotal, deeply confusing moment, the confession that throws the entire motive into chaos.
As Gladden was dying, he told Jack, "I had to kill your brother to save him. Look at me, from becoming like me."
It's a huge piece of evidence, but it's loaded with assumption. Gladden was a deeply disturbed pedophile who believed he was performing some kind of twisted mercy killing.
He assumed Jack was asking about a child he had abused.
And he claimed he killed the detective Sean to save him from the consequences of that trauma, implying Sean was somehow connected to his world.
So Gladden's quick, violent death on the scene framed him perfectly as the poet.
He was violent, linked to the forensic clue he had access, and he confessed to killing Sean McEvoy. For the FBI, the case was closed.
But for Jack, that nagging doubt remained. Gladden was just too crude to be the poet who cited Edgar Allan Poe.
Gladden's death, rather than bringing Jack peace, it just intensified his focus. He realized that Gladden was a very effective distraction.
The final pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, not pointing toward the obvious monster, but toward someone much closer.
Someone who knew BSS protocols inside out, Rachel Walling.
That's a massive leap of faith, accusing a fellow agent. What was Jack's core evidence against her?
Jack went back to those hotel phone records from Phoenix, the ones he'd used to expose Thorson. He found the evidence connecting the leak to the reporter and the poet's facts, but he noticed something crucial about the timing.
What was it?
Rachel had been in Jack's room near midnight that Saturday. The three most damning phone calls. The one to the reporter, the one to the Quantico General line for the facts, and a third call were made shortly after.
So why did Jack conclude Rachel made those calls, and not Thorson?
Because of the timing and the content. Jack had learned that Thorson was out of the room buying condoms during that exact 20-minute window. While Thorson was gone, someone was in his room making these critical, incriminating calls.
And the third call was the clincher.
The call to the PTL network system line at 12:56 a.m. And the Quantico call used the general line, not a known BSS direct line, which suggested the caller was purposefully concealing their specific insider knowledge of the FBI system.
So she had the opportunity. But what about the motive? A BSS profiler becoming a serial killer of cops.
Jack started digging into Rachel's background, and what he found provided the chilling trauma that could fuel this kind of rage.
Her father, a Baltimore cop, had died of a supposed suicide years earlier.
Right. And Jack tracked down Dan Bledsoe, the former partner who destroyed the note in the McCafferty case, and asked him about Rachel's father.
What did Bledsoe reveal?
Bledsoe's unofficial report suggested the father's bed was suspiciously made, implying he hadn't slept in it, and the horrible suggestion that the father had been sleeping with his own daughter, Rachel.
Oh, wow.
This massive, unaddressed trauma, a cop abusing his child, covered up as a suicide, combined with Rachel's history of interviewing monsters like Gladden and Gomble for the BSS, it created the perfect profile for the ultimate inside killer.
Seeking vengeance against abusive authority figures.
Jack must have felt sick with the implications. The woman he was growing close to was, in his mind, the methodical, ruthless poet.
He was convinced. So he confronted FBI Assistant Director Bob Backus, one of the most respected agents in the Bureau, with his theory.
He laid it all out. The hotel records, the BSS knowledge that allowed her to stage the scenes perfectly, and the foundational trauma that fueled her revenge.
And Backus, the picture of institutional calm, just listened intently. This must have been the most tense moment of the entire investigation.
It was. Backus listened to Jack's detailed, evidence-based accusation against Rachel, and then, without batting an eye, delivered the shocking truth.
What did he say?
He calmly confessed that he was the poet. He was the true Eidolon.
Assistant Director Bob Backus, the man running the investigation. That's unimaginable. What was his motive?
Backus admitted he was an abuse victim himself. And the first suicide, Detective Beltran in Sarasota. He was Backus's abuser.
My God.
Backus found Beltran on the PTL network, and when Beltran was eliminated, Backus essentially took his place on the pedophile board, adopting the alias Eidolon.
So he wasn't just killing random cops. He was eliminating the very detectives who threatened Gladden's network, which he had now infiltrated.
Which allowed him to systematically take out the abuse perpetrators or the cops getting too close.
This means Backus was running the investigation, while simultaneously managing the pedophile network and killing the detectives who might expose it, all while using his internal knowledge to deflect blame.
It's a terrifying level of tactical genius. He explained that he used Rachel as a pawn, knowing her traumatic past would make her a believable fall guy, and Gladden as the scapegoat for the Bate murders and the general criminal activity.
Let's go back to that forensic detail, the animal fat extract found in Orsilac. How did he use that to frame Gladden?
He knew Thompson, the forensic specialist, would instantly recognize that specific lubricant extract combination. It was so rare and linked specifically to the BSS rape project files, specifically to Gomble.
So he planted it.
He staged Orsulak's death by wiping the lubricated condom residue inside the victim's mouth. This action perfectly directed the FBI team, led by Rachel, to immediately pull those files, focusing intense suspicion directly on Gladden, who was already on the scene in LA.
He used the system's knowledge against itself.
He used his knowledge of the FBI's own archive and forensic expertise to create the perfect, bulletproof deflection away from himself, the highly respected assistant director.
He had orchestrated the entire FBI investigation to track Gladden while he eliminated the homicide detectives like Sean McEvoy who were closing in.
And this final confrontation was supposed to be Backus's final masterpiece. He had lured Jack to a remote house on Mulholland Drive, claiming he was going to conduct a final, confidential interview.
But the interview was a setup. He was going to murder Jack and stage his death as the poet's final act.
Precisely. Backus revealed he'd replaced Jack's headache pills, which Jack had been taking throughout the trip, with a powerful cocktail of codeine and sodium pentothal.
Truth serum, a hypnotic enhancer.
Backus intended to hypnotize Jack, stage his death as a suicide, and in his own chilling words, give Jack firsthand knowledge of the poet's methods.
So Jack was being paralyzed by the very pills he thought were curing his headache. That's horrifying control.
And Backus demonstrated this control right there in the room, using verbal commands to paralyze Jack's arms, showing the drug's effectiveness. He was planning to stage the death with a needle injury to Jack's palm, making the suicide look like a final, self-inflicted ritual.
But the setup failed at the last moment.
Rachel Walling, who had been growing increasingly distrustful of Backus after his strange behavior during the Gladden confrontation, had followed them to the house.
So she bursts in.
Right as Backus was demonstrating the hypnotic control, he was about to stab Jack's pommels. Rachel comes around the corner and opens fire.
The highly respected assistant director was shot, shrieked, and fell off the cliff into the darkness below.
And Jack survived, barely breaking free from the paralyzing suggestion. The killer, the ultimate undetected threat, was the highly respected, second-generation FBI agent who had successfully used his institutional knowledge to hunt the hunters.
The investigation, which started with one man's refusal to accept a convenient lie about his brother's death, it concluded with the exposure of the true poet.
And he wasn't a random monster, but a sophisticated predator entrenched within the very institution tasked with catching him.
Backus, the ultimate insider, knew all the BSS protocols, all the counter protocols, all the psychological pressure points of the men he targeted.
He used his position, his trauma, and his knowledge to create this perfect crime spree, tracking Gladden to eliminate homicide detectives like Sean McEvoy, who threatened his intricate network, and ensuring every death looked like a simple, understandable suicide.
Until Jack connected the dots.
The cost to Jack McEvoy was immense, physically and emotionally. He lost his twin brother, was nearly killed via hypnotic suggestion.
And he suffered a severe hand injury during the struggle with Backus, which restricted his thumb movement and made typing his livelihood difficult.
He was ultimately cut out of the story by his editor, who correctly identified that Jack had become part of the story. But Jack leveraged his harrowing insider knowledge to write a book proposal, securing the rights to the true story of the poet.
But the source material leaves us with this deeply unsettling note. The ambiguous fate of Backus, the Eidolon.
He fell from the cliff, wounded, into a storm drainage below. But as the book closes, his voice echoes from the darkness. The facade was gone. Backus was gone. Now there was only Eidolon. An Eidolon would triumph.
That phrase suggests the professional, bureaucratic side of Backus was eliminated, and only the pure, instinctual killer remains.
The massive federal investigation only managed to put together fragments of a shattered personality. And the true dark fabric of the poet's psychology remains a profound mystery, suggesting he may have survived the fall and is now operating purely on instinct, untraceable by his former colleagues.
This case really reveals the most chilling vulnerability in any system designed to protect us. The FBI's worst nightmare came true. The killer was literally on the inside.
It forces you to reflect on how systems of power and trust can be inverted. Backus's greatest asset wasn't a weapon, it was institutional trust and comprehensive knowledge of forensic weakness.
So what does this all mean for you? This deep dive forces us to confront a provocative thought. What specific knowledge, what kind of power, or what unaddressed trauma within the very institutions we rely on for safety, law enforcement, intelligence, medicine, could create the most dangerous, undetected, predators.
Predators capable of weaponizing institutional trust and routine procedure against the very people tasked with protecting us.
It makes you wonder what unseen patterns are hiding behind the most convenient conclusions, waiting for a persistent reporter like Jack to look closer.
Indeed. Always question the obvious conclusion. That's the first step in finding the truth.
And that's the end of our deep dive. We'll see you next time.